Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Heretic Happy Hour live stream on Sunday. I'm Keith Giles. Matthew is not here. And you know what happens when one of us is not here? It's just sort of a free-for-all, but not really. It's just going to be something a little different than normal. I am joined by my good friend, JP Mavinga. JP, how you doing, JP? Welcome. Thanks for joining me on this call. Yeah, tell them a little bit about yourself. And then probably as you talk about your background and stuff, it'll become clear where we're headed for this episode.
Well, I work as an illustrator, designer, concept artist. I got into this kind of by accident. A friend, I guess I was into pop culture, quite a bit. And a friend just brought me to a comic shop one day. This was 95.
Wow.
Prior to that, I thought all that stuff was just infantile and beneath me. And I thought I was going to be either an engineer or product designer, but I was very much into science and, or maybe something in biology. I wasn't sure. But that completely changed the course of my life. And so, I've worked, a couple places. I mean, I got my start really professionally with DC Comics.
Yeah, what were you doing?
And then, so during the Terry Dotson run, I did an inventory issue of Harley Quinn. Wow. And a couple of us actually did that. But the idea was that in case there were ever delays in the schedule, like one of those would get slotted in, and it turns out there weren't that many delays, so mine never got published.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
My first, paid, right? You get paid?
I got paid. Yeah, it was really a cool gig. I mean, I have the pages. But Robin is the first thing that got published. That was a cover. And then I didn't do too much more with them. And the next things I did, a couple of things with Image, small, like fill-in little stories. And then I worked at McFarlane for a couple of years and freelance, and then Sideshow for a little over 5 years, 6 years, something like that.
Right.
Well, maybe 7 in total, because they were a client as well before all that stuff. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. And you and I met, so this was early 2000s, right? When I did this Plastic Animal Studios thing. Yeah, so back in the day, this is before I had a blog. I wasn't really doing a lot of writing, theologically, anything like that. I got this job that I hated. It was like so technical. I was working for Ingram Micro, and I was tracking shipments on a spreadsheet for Apple computers. Ingram Micro was Apple's like global distributor. So I was tracking tracking truck shipments for Apple from our warehouses to wholesalers and things like that. And so I hate spreadsheets. You know what I mean? Like it was killing me. So I just needed some kind of a creative outlet. It kind of forced me to I need to do something creative or I'm going to go insane. So I came up with these, I started writing these little short stories, science fiction short stories. I went online and I found a bunch of artists who were posting some of their work. I found your stuff and a bunch of other artists. And we ended up creating this Plastic Animal Studios. We did a couple of ash cans. We published, I think we only published one thing. So Carrie Randolph and I did a hard video short story that ended up in an anthology called Prophecy. That did the first and last issue. We did one, and then sadly the guy died. The guy doing it died. Yeah, suddenly. So that we were planned. We were gonna. What was his name? Christian Donaldson and I had a second one that was going to be in issue 2, and then the guy died, and then the whole thing went away. So that never happened. But anyway,
I know Christian, actually.
Yeah, Christian Donaldson, great guy. I love his style. Yeah, he and I did a little short story called The Devil's Riding Horse, which I still love. It was a great little short comic. So anyway, that's how you and I got in touch. And then we only did that for a couple of years, and then then I kind of just got this idea of like writing blogs and doing stuff more like about theology and things like that, and then kind of shut down Plastic Animal. But we've stayed in touch,
Yeah.
and and then I think actually you're going to be. It's already happened. We've already recorded it, but it won't be out till Tuesday of this week. You are on a panel on Heretic Happy Hour coming up to talk with Derek Webb and Angie Von Slaughter, and talking about art as a creative resistance, right? So that's pretty cool. So check that out on Tuesday. But yeah, so what we actually wanted to talk about, even though a lot of this and a lot of our connection maybe is on comics, we will get to some comics, I think, in this conversation. But we decided we wanted to talk about science fiction. I know you and I both are big fans of sci-fi, and I wanted to ask you, and it may be what you just said. I don't know. Were you already into science fiction when you discovered comics, or how did you get into science fiction? And what was like some of the first sci-fi that you really got into?
Honestly, I'm not sure, because it's just there before you can even identify what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some funny stories. So like, I remember I first came to the US in 1986. I didn't speak any English. I spoke French. And I remember staying up late at night. I was like a little kid, like 7, 8 years old, watching just stuff. And I remember watching classic Star Trek.
Oh, me too.
And being into it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I also remember watching The Next Generation when it came out.
Yeah.
Except I didn't know they were different shows.
Okay.
And so because I didn't understand everything and speak the language well, I thought Kirk was Riker. I thought he got, tall
demoted.
White guy, whatever. Yeah. I thought, okay, he got demoted. And then I was like, well, Spock was the coolest one. Like, why is he gone? Like, what happened? And then it took me some time to figure out that no, they were separate, and it was like a long time apart, because clearly the shows looked different. I didn't quite know why.
Very different. Yeah.
So even then, I loved it. Prior to that, overseas was more French material, and there was a lot of anime. So I knew about Captain Harlock.
Oh yeah.
I knew Battleship Yamato, like the space one.
Oh yeah.
So before I even knew anything, it was there. You know? And I loved space. I remember when the Challenger exploded.
Yeah.
Like, I knew it was tragic, but even as a kid, I felt it was so heroic, and it felt like you're a kid, everything's kind of magical. I didn't feel that gap between reality and science fiction. I felt like they were going out to space to do space stuff, like I saw in the shows,
Yeah. And exactly. Yeah. And there was called the Enterprise, right? The space shuttle was called the Challenger.
Challenger was the shuttle. Yeah. I thought the Enterprise was like the prototype.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, exactly.
And then there was Columbia, Challenger,
Atlantis.
Maybe, something like that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So I think that's true. Like, as a kid, you don't really differentiate. It's just sort of entertainment, right? It's TV.
Yeah.
But now you can go like, hey, science fiction was, Star Trek was definitely that. I mean, like Planet of the Apes, that movie, I was really into that. There was a TV show as well. There was some other obscure sci-fi. I mean, Logan's Run. I remember seeing Logan's Run as a kid in the theater. Probably was too young to watch that movie, but I was allowed to go see that movie. And there was also a really weird. It's sort of a precursor to like Power Rangers, but it was a Japanese film called Inframan that I watched. Yeah, it's very similar. If you watch Inframan, it's one guy, but he's in this crazy suit and he does all the gymnastics and flips and crazy stuff. So it's like actually sort of a mix between Ultraman and a precursor to like Power Rangers, because he's fighting. He grows really huge and he can fight these big Godzilla style monsters, and it's pretty.
Watch something like that. I think we call it Spectral Man overseas.
It might have been.
Yeah,
it's all red, like red and silver.
Yeah,
red and white. Yeah.
And it's like a kaiju things. You get all big and fight between the buildings and stuff.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, dude. I mean, when I saw it as a little kid, I thought it was so awesome, and then I saw it again as an adult, and it's hilarious. It's so stupid. It's like
Yeah.
slapstick and so dumb.
I had a similar experience with. I used to love Silverhawks.
Yes,
There were
that was great.
Thundercats. I liked it, but Silverhawks was my jam. And
But there
then,
was a face, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine gave me the DVD collection for my 30th birthday.
Wow.
And yeah, and I watched it, and like I had all the nostalgia feelings, but the stories were just so terrible.
See, that's the same with me.
Unwatchable.
Yeah, that's the same with me with Battle of the Planets. I was so into that show in when I was in junior high. I still love it. I mean, the visuals of it, it's great design. The characters look so cool. The theme song was great. Like, there's a lot of things about it I like. I still like nostalgia, but same kind of thing. When I tried to show it to my kids, and it was just like we couldn't even get through one episode. It was like, this is really dopey. This is really goofy. Like, oh well.
Yeah. It's made for the age group, because I showed the Thundercats. I mean, Silverhawks. To me, was unwatchable. I watched just to like try to remember,
Sure.
and I thought I'd redesign them one day. But I showed them to my nieces and nephews who were the appropriate age.
Yeah.
And they loved it. Now, they're my
Wow.
sister's kids. They could not get enough of it. Every time they would see me, like, Uncle JP Jumps, can we watch Silverhawks? And I was like, okay. So I put it on. They would watch it, and my sister was like, I don't know what it is, but it's like, they loved it. So
Yeah, that's funny. So now,
Yeah.
I mean, are you still a fan of science fiction?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any favorite authors that you like to read, or how do you consume it? Because like there's sci-fi, right? There's books, there's film, television, there's even comics. I do want to talk about science fiction comics as well, but what do you like when it comes to science fiction?
I mean, these days it's mostly shows and movies.
Yeah.
Primarily because actually I don't even watch it that much. I listen to it, because my eyes are occupied. I'm usually
Right.
writing or drawing or something like that.
Yeah.
The authors that impacted me most would be, I think, Masami Nishiro, which is comics, which I guess we've come around to that.
Ghost in the Shell. Yeah.
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 Ghost in the Shell, Appleseed,
Appleseed, yeah.
other things, Orion, smaller works, but Ghost in the Shell and Appleseed.
Did you ever
are his
see
main.
Black Magic in '66?
I saw it a long time ago in high school. I don't remember it.
It's kind of a ripoff of Terminator.
Yeah, I've read it.
It's cool.
It's like his earliest work.
Yes. Yes.
And when you look at his trajectory from Black Magic,
yeah,
to the Appleseed, and then to the eventual Ghost in the Shell, it's astonishing that, and he did that stuff in his 20s and 30s. That's what blows my mind.
Yeah.
But William Gibson is one. Actually, there were three that I really read when in my kind of formative years as a creative. So there was William Gibson, who, to me, the visual and the texture, like that's the world that I conceive, my mind I live in. That's what I draw naturally. And it's interesting to have someone describe it really in such poetic language that there's rarely anything tangible. He just creates an atmosphere that you then populate.
Yeah, that's right.
I read David Weber. David Weber he still is. He did the Honor Harrington series. So basically what he did was, if you take Horatio Hornblower, the ocean going thing, and then you Tom Clancy it in terms of its technical detail and kind of the world building and the accuracy, and then you stick it in space.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it feels like you're reading Tom Clancy in the year 3500. Is really what it's like.
Wow.
And that stuff's incredible. But it's got like a British Empire thing. So, Lady Dame, this, that, and the other, Lord Sir, this, that, and the other, and their parliament always battling in politics. So the world building richness of the Harrington universe was very inspiring to me. And he wrote another book called Path of the Fury, which was the funnest novel I've ever read. And it's a short revenge story. Some pirates came and messed with the wrong Marine. She almost died, but she came back and she figured out where they came from and destroyed all of them. That's the whole story. But she does it with a sentient AI spaceship, an intelligence officer, and a really interesting investigation, all in space with like the appropriate weapons and ballistics and rail guns and mech
Yeah,
armor
yeah.
and all that stuff. So, and then the other author that really influenced me was Greg Bear.
Okay.
Greg Bear writes hard science fiction, and
Yeah.
his stuff really, because a lot of other sci-fi, really, it's just dressing a
Yeah.
little bit of the science. It has substance, but Greg Bear was like challenging me. There was in Eon, there was some math. He was talking like he had the equation in the book.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know what this is. So I asked my dad, and he kind of looked at it. My dad's a mathematician,
Oh,
PhD,
wow.
studied at Louvain, taught at Princeton, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm showing him this equation in this novel, and he's like, I mean, I think I know what this is about, but like, what are you reading here? And,
Yeah.
he couldn't explain it. I was like, fine, whatever. Something about time travel and dimensions, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's Greg Bear. And so he had a book called Moving Mars that I thought was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was kind of string theory oriented in terms of its premise.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of things with interesting biology. There was a planet where they thought they were encountering a bunch of creatures, but actually the entire planet was almost like one biology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was sampling them to try to replicate similar scions. But anyway, they had to figure that out. And it was really interesting because, a lot of our Star Trek stuff is every world is the same. It's all,
Right.
but they encountered a truly alien environment.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great book. So those three shaped kind of my thoughts on science fiction in terms of literature during those years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love William Gibson. I think Neuromancer is just phenomenal. And I read Neuromancer. It's really wild because I discovered the book and read it. I think I finished Neuromancer about a week or two before the first Matrix film came out. And so as I'm sitting watching the Matrix, I'm like, that guy should sue them because this is that book I just read. It's Neuromancer, and they just ripped him off. And it kind of does make it where, like, I heard they are making a Neuromancer TV series, I think on Apple TV or something, or Prime or something. Which I'd love to see it. But the thing is, it's like, if anyone isn't familiar with a novel, they're just going to say, oh, it's just the Matrix, right? Like, it's ruined now. It's like they've stolen, the ideas from him, and now they kind of own it more than Gibson does. But it's really all begins with him. And then did you ever read Pattern Recognition?
Yes, I read that one around 2004. Yeah, I love that one. But that's the one that I'd like to see as a movie because it's interesting how you would figure out how to do that thing where those clips that were occurring in the movie that were like, in the book that nobody could figure out where they came from. Like I would be interested to somebody like actually do that.
Yeah. That's honestly the most interesting thing. I just reread it about a month ago, and reading it again, it's a phenomenal piece of writing. And actually, my feeling was after reading it for the second time was like, I honestly don't know if you could make it a movie or a TV series because so much of it, what's happening is in the writing. You know what I mean? It's really what's happening in the mind of the character who I love, Case Pollard. How she's allergic to branding and stuff. I think that's so crazy. Very interesting. But but the
I think I am too.
Yeah, yeah. I actually do want to go and pull all the labels off, stuff, and cut the labels off my clothing and stuff. But I loved it though. I think it's really great. I think it'd be super challenging though to pull it off. To get that same feeling visually, it would take like a really smart director who could translate the novel into something visual like that. But I love the thing about the clips, right? Because that's the idea that someone's making a movie and releasing just little scenes, and then this cult kind of grows up around it of people on message boards like, oh, a new clip's been discovered, and they all analyze it and study it, and they have theories and stuff like that, which is really cool. And that's the kind of thing you could see that happening. So I love Gibson. I haven't read, the only Greg Bear I've read is you said Greg Bear, right?
Greg Bear, yeah.
Yeah. I started reading Blood Music, but I haven't gotten through that one yet. Yeah.
He's not easy to read. I've read so the easier ones that I read, because Eon is the one of the early big ones. Eon is really hard. Like I read that in high school and had to read it again in college. It was just hard.
Yeah.
Moving Mars, I felt was better just as a story, even if you don't understand the science.
Yeah.
Um, Forge of God, I think it was called. That one was really basic. It was fun. It's like just alien invasion, the Earth's gonna blow up, like get away, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really simple and fun.
Yeah.
God, I'm thinking, there's a couple others I don't remember the name of that I read. Slant. So Slant is his
Yes.
cyberpunk one. Slant
Okay.
is weird,
Yeah.
but in it you have biological computing. So they set up essentially using a little ecosystem with all the mycelia and everything as
Yeah.
a computing device.
Yeah.
And that was really, really interesting. But some of the biology in that book was intriguing. Some of it was, let's say, not for young people. Like you should really be mature in terms of what's going on in there.
Yes.
It was the first time that I really, and I read it in I think it came out in 97. So I read it around 97, 98.
Yeah.
But it was like all over the kind of like gender, trans, all that kind of was in there at that time. Wow. And I was like over my head, but I mean, I read it, but I was reading it as sci-fi. I didn't think it was ever gonna be forefront in a culture. But yeah, you had like all kinds of genders and people altering themselves to be whatever, right? Yeah. And so it wasn't even anything that was like our biology. It was like literally like altered biology to be all kinds. So like that was an aspect of the book that at that age I was like, wow, this is new. Mm-hmm. It sounded sci-fi but feasible, but I was like, wow, are we headed there? And
so that's pretty wild. Yeah, like one of the first novels I ever read that dealt with that was Ursula Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. I don't know if you've read any of her stuff. But there's there's basically the story is there's like an envoy or an ambassador of the Federation of Planets, basically, right? All the advanced species in the universe, and they're all human. So they might be slightly different, but ultimately they're all humanoid. And so there really aren't any super alien. Like in other words, all the intelligent life we found basically is all like us, right? And so there's a planet of humans that are just beginning to kind of be ready to be brought into the Federation, right? They're not aware of anything. They're not space travels yet, but they're getting to the point where they could become space explorers. So this ambassador is sent to them to kind of convince them that they should join, right, the alliance or whatever. But the interesting thing is that these humans on this planet have a very fluid gender. So, and they're sort of all born, I think they're born like male, but then when they reach like a puberty, they become female for a few, like a month or so. And then they're fertile, and then they can get pregnant and have children. But if they don't, then they transition back to being male again. It's really wild. So to meet these humans that sort of like had gender fluidity. And it's not a big part of the novel, but I mean, Ursula Le Guin is sort of credited as being one of the first, sci-fi authors to even entertain that possibility, right? So really interesting stuff. Yeah, I like her. Not everything, but I loved that one. I loved The Lathe of Heaven, which is an amazing, amazing story. And then The Dispossessed. Those are only 3 of hers I've read. But anyway, you and I have we kind of met over this whole thing of comics and science fiction, because the stuff I was writing, Plastic Animal, was really all sci-fi based stuff. In fact, initially they were just going to be short stories or maybe novels or something. But because I was finding these great artists online and corresponding with them, I was also writing for Comic Book Resources at the time. I was writing a column for them and interviewing people for them. So I was getting in contact with some people like you, and again, Christian Donaldson, Terry Randolph, Andrei Szymanowicz, Brett Wildelli. Trying to think who else. There was a guy named Jeff Spokes. Oh, he was really cool.
Yeah.
You remember that guy? He did the. We did one together called Improvisation. It was really loved his style. Really cool. That one wasn't sci-fi, but anyway, that was most of what I was doing was sci-fi stuff and trying to put together these little short sci-fi comic projects and stuff. And so I realized like a lot of, I mean, I would say probably even before television, I think probably my first sci-fi was a comic book, like X-Men or something, where, there are these mutants that have the next phase of human evolution and they've got these crazy abilities and outcasts of society kind of a thing, right? It's a great concept. So comics, like there's a lot of things in comics that I love, and probably most of the comics that I do love are sci-fi type comics. So I'm curious if there's any like science fiction sort of comics that you really love, and why? What do you like?
So many.
I have a list. But again, I made a list before the show, so I thought about it.
I'm going to start with something really obscure, at least to probably people now.
Yeah.
But there's something called, I have it over here, 2001 Nights by Yokinobu Hoshino.
Okay. I don't think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a story, I think, of humanity kind of like venturing out into space. It's a manga. And I don't know when it was drawn, but it's not like the crazy wild manga. It's like the old school stuff. Just beautiful, beautiful art. And like it's real like science fiction, mature science fiction. And I remember picking that up, this comic shop that this friend of mine took me in high school. The guy was a little bit different. And once he saw what I was, like, he's like, yeah, you can buy whatever you want. But he would like curate things because he knew, because I would draw and I would show up with everybody else that knew him, because he kind of was an artist guy too, would do the usual like superhero muscle stuff,
Capes.
And I had,
I
had a sketchbook with no figures. It was all tech, different concepts for shoes, cars, clothes, spaceships, guns, but no people.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I couldn't draw people. This was in 95.
You've gotten much better at drawing people now, I'll say.
I mean, I worked at it, it's not natural. It's still like awkward for me. It's easier for me to just draw a robot or something else than a person.
Right.
But yeah, and so he would find these things from like he introduced me to Sid Mead.
Oh gosh, yes, Sid Mead.
Yeah, and so like he had those big Sid Mead sketchbooks. He's like, I have this over here. If you don't want it, I'll display it.
Wow.
And and I would look through them. Oh my gosh. So
I gotta ask real quick. Can I ask you? Do you have any Sid Mead, any of his books? Yeah,
they sit very close to me.
Because
like this close.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So this is actually super valuable because it came out, I think, in the 80s.
I was gonna say I have looked at I've looked at some of these. They are not cheap and not easy to find. What's
and
yes. Ed?
Studio Image, I guess 1.
Yeah, okay. Studio Image 1.
Yeah, I think there was a set of them.
Okay.
But yeah, like wherever I've seen these, I mean, people sell them for like $400-500. I don't even know where to get one, but like some of these images have been shown elsewhere, but like.
Oh yeah, and some of these, I think, right? Some of these were inspiration for Blade Runner too, right?
Yeah, so he actually was a concept artist on Blade Runner. A lot of the look of it, he determined. I mean, he worked on a lot of stuff.
A lot of the vehicles in Blade Runner he designed.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of these paintings are just shocking. I mean.
Yeah. So talented, man. The guy was amazing.
So, I remember seeing stuff like this and having dreams about it later. And then, you see movies like Inception or Doctor Strange where the world folds up and you're like, But this is another amazing painting.
Oh man. Yeah. So great.
Yeah. So, seeing this in high school, it's just like unlocked something in my mind where, you know, we're not doing this as a culture yet,
Right.
which is not. And but those of us who can inspire, whether it's through writing or art, can kind of like set that bar and keep
Right.
saying, hey, this is where we're going or whatever. And it's not just the visual possibilities. I think as human beings, we need to challenge ourselves
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah.
Athletes do it, intellectuals do it,
Mhm.
like we kids do it, you watch kids build like blocks and they fall and they get mad and they do it again and get better and
Yeah.
get better. Like that's what we are. And as a culture, I think that type of work, the science fictions, keeps us aspiring.
Yeah.
I don't think we get the iPad without Star Trek or the cell phone for that matter.
Right.
Maybe we do it another way, but we don't get that device.
That's right.
That challenge of like constraining or packaging, I would say, all that technology and feature into one piece of hardware. So
That's right.
yeah,
That's exactly right.
Ghost in the Shell is one of the comics that got me there. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think when it comes to science fiction comics, you can certainly argue whatever, but I don't think I've read anything better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of how many topics it touches so casually, so convincingly and comfortably.
Yeah.
From the cyber brain thing, the cyborgs,
Yes.
the way the guns work in their design, all the mechs,
Yeah.
the AI issues, the politics, the architecture, the military, like everything in that world but it's all built around this question of like what makes us human. And it
Yeah.
does it by confronting the spiritual issue right
Right.
next to the, consciousness as a computational problem,
Right.
right?
Like Ghost in the Shell really dives into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that just
Yeah.
head on. And so, I've never seen anybody really battle with it. Now, it's not the best written thing,
Yeah.
in terms of like if you actually try to pace and like, but it wasn't written that way.
Right.
To me, it feels like an essay that's got incredible visuals, which you really kind of.
Right. Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw, I was aware of the manga Ghost in the Shell. And then when I saw the movie came out, and I remember I was living in Orange County at the time. Me and some guys I just knew these guys from the comic shop that was near my house in Huntington
Mhm.
Beach. And they were all going to go see it. And they also rented out, like from the comic shop, they would rent out like, anime and stuff. So I rented a bunch of great movies there, talked about them. So, what we would just talk about this kind of stuff all the time. So when the movie came out, Ghost in the Shell, it was at the Beverly Theater in Los Angeles. I went with these guys I barely knew, just was sitting in the back seat. We all drove up, like 5 of us. We drove up, went in, saw Ghost in the Shell. It was the only place you could see it. It was only playing like one theater for like a week, and I will never forget. I watched that movie, and when we walked out, like everybody was silent, like in the car on the way back.
Yeah.
And one of the guys finally said, he goes, "Man, that wasn't anime. That was brainime. Like my head
Yeah.
hurts. Like it was so deep because it is about like, and that's what I love personally. That's the kind of stuff I really get into. I love the psychological part of it. I love any kind of film, but certainly science fiction films, right? That really challenge you and make you think. That's why I love Philip K. Dick. Like all of his stuff is all about like what makes us human, right? Blade Runner is all about that, but all of Philip K. Dick's novels are about that. Um, and it really comes down to like you said, consciousness, empathy, um, which is really fascinating. Really, like you said, it almost becomes the science fiction, whether it's the novel or the comic or uh, the manga, the film. It's giving you an opportunity to have these kind of conversations or to ask these questions, right? And that's again what I would, to me, great science fiction. It's not just about spaceships and laser beams and aliens, and what I mean, that's like the lowest kind of base level of science fiction. What I think makes science fiction really interesting and fascinating and relevant is the kind of science fiction that does challenge us, that does get us to think about not about the future so much as of now. Like,
Yeah,
who are we right
absolutely.
now? What are we doing now? And how possibly what we're doing now can become the future. And do we want that, right? Is it going to create a good future or a bad future? And what we do now will determine that, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I view it in a lot of ways, and I know this might sound kind of lofty, but as a spiritual exercise in many respects.
Yeah.
In that, you know, technology and culture have this intertwined relationship across time. When we study cultures from the past, what they did is rooted to their technology.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, as because change has been so slow, the rules and dynamics within that culture gets to adapt to that technology very well.
Yeah.
Our pace of change has become so accelerated
That's right.
that we need to be oftentimes decades of thought ahead
Yeah.
to just be ready for what's coming, right? All the AI issues that we're dealing now, like the ethics conversation began, over the last 50 years.
That's right.
Arnold Schwarzenegger became iconic for Terminator,
That's
right? And
Yeah.
so in the film, it's just another guy with a gun thing. We've seen that in the movies.
Sure.
But the real conversation underneath is, what happens when we lose control of our machines?
That's right.
What does that mean for our lives?
Yeah.
Now, sure, that was that type of conflict, but it's what we've seen since then with all the different types of stories. It's like, this is affecting our labor markets today.
Yes.
And so the loss isn't necessarily a bullet coming at you, but it's a different type of thing,
Yeah.
The how,
Right.
and in 2001, like, do you want something like a genius child making decisions for you? Like, are you sure?
Right.
We don't even understand our morality to attempt to program it into something.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't take much for me to reliably have a sense of your decency and you have a sense of my decency, and then we can operate.
Yeah.
But something you're programming from the root up, we don't know. And, in a child, it's learned through interaction and empathy, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But we've never hard coded it. And so I think just creating and experiencing science fiction does that to us in a way that I'm not sure other genres do specifically in terms of like moving forward culturally. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. You're right about like, I was just watching something like a couple hours before we jumped on. There's a couple of guys on YouTube that have channels where they talk about science fiction. And I was watching this one guy talking about exactly what you were saying. He said, in my lifetime, he's about my age, right? He was saying, like, in my lifetime, I've grown up from the days of like, you go from like 8-track, music to cassettes and CDs, and now downloading, and now it's in the cloud. You go from a phone that's connected to the wall to a phone that's in your pocket to a computer that's in your pocket to something you can just like talk to it and say, what's the closest Chinese restaurant to me with a 5-star review on Yelp? Ding, here it is, right? And it's so the acceleration of technology has been so incredible, but it's the technology is outpacing, like you were saying, like it's sort of it's threatening to outpace our ability to have the ethics to kind of keep up with it, right? To understand, like exactly what you were saying about AI. And the great thing is, like, it's science fiction can become sort of, it has done a great job of becoming the cautionary tale. The question is, will we take it seriously, right? Because, there's been so much science fiction, books, novels, television, movies, that have warned us, right? If you have a super intelligent computer that doesn't have empathy, it will not work out good for you, right? So how can we make sure that we're not creating something that is smarter than us um, and capable of, locking you out of the spaceship, so you can't get back in. And so, yeah, it's really important for us to keep
I
these things in
almost
mind.
wonder if we don't have too much.
Yeah.
Like, the story used to be so important to how our culture is shaped,
Yes.
right? Like all the great stories, because there weren't many. Now there's so many. It's like, yeah. And like you can have two people that are science fiction fans and haven't read the same stories.
Right.
But
yeah, that's true. Because in the day, it used to be, if there were science fiction thing, we've all read Foundation trilogy. We've all read,
yes.
right? We've all read Arthur Clarke. We've all read
Mm.
Heinlein, Starship Troopers, right? But now
So it's like,
yeah, it's a great point.
we'd be from the same culture. We have the same stories,
No
right?
crossover. Yeah.
But now, as it's hard to even have those conversations because we're not talking about the same thing. We don't have the same experience, and so that's what kind of concerns me about the ethics things, because the stories don't really get to shape that anymore because there's so much. I don't think we take it as seriously, and even if we do, we don't have the same framework.
Right.
That is one thing that's weird. Like music, when we were coming up, you didn't have to like the same music. We'd all heard basically the same music on the radio, right? You can reference a song and know, yeah, that song. And so, like, I can say, for example, was it John Bon Jovi, "Leaving on a Prayer," and what song that is, the era when it was playing,
I've
whatever,
seen the music video. Yeah.
Yeah, I can say, okay, Dr. Dre, The Chronic, boom, what era that comes from, what it sounds like. I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming out today, and like some kids listen to it, and some are like, I've seen kids that are completely into 80s music and they know it better than I do. And I'm like,
yeah,
you identified that and you locked in on it and just tune everything else out. Well,
yeah.
Feels good to us, but they're not necessarily in step with their peers because they don't have to be. So they don't have to have the same culture, the same language. And
that's really interesting. I've never thought about that, but you're right.
Yeah, the technology has given us this.
Yes.
And yet almost at the same time, it's like it's taken away our ability to respond to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's a great point. I mean, the music is another. You're great. That's right. Like, you used to think of musical styles in terms of decades, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's the music of the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, right? If I just said 50s music, you've got immediately in your head, what the elements that would make a song a 50s song, right? Even if I played a song from the 50s and you'd never heard it before, you could guess, oh, this is from the 50s because it just had a certain sound, like within a decade.
Yep.
Or the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. Again, like 80s music,
synthesizers,
super great production, like super clean production, right? Over processed, reverb and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and then the 90s, right? You have like grunge and all that, but then you get into the 2000s, and really, so like for like the past 24 years, music has just become like anything and everything, and even to the point where like certain genres aren't even their own genre anymore. It's like I still don't understand, for an example, why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is inducting people like Dionne Warwick and hip hop artists and country music. It's like, is it rock and roll or not? Like, I don't get this. Like, it just becomes like, it's just everything. It's just everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just kind of like that and so there is but like to your point, it's like there's almost like a loss of identity in that, right? So there's a generation of people, you could say like, I could say like my music would be the 80s or the 90s, right? But yeah, my kids are just like, well, it's just anything. It's everything, There is nothing to sort of have an identity for your generation where this is our music. And you could probably say that with a lot of things, right?
Yeah, and in fairness, like it doesn't really matter other than there's no place to start together to have that dialogue, and that's what kind of makes me just wonder about it. Like,
yeah,
you watch The Matrix, and at least when I saw it, like it
Yeah.
was profound, all the different things. And like
Oh
you,
yeah.
like I identified the Ghost in the Shell stuff, the
Oh yeah.
Neuromancer stuff,
Yeah.
all the
The
different
John
things.
Woo. There's a bunch of John Woo ripoff stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The thing about the Matrix is it's a beautiful amalgamation of like 5 or 6 different things that are so cool. It's all kind of shoved into one beautiful thing. But but it wears its influences on its sleeve. Like it's not hiding. Oh, there's Ghost in the
Yeah.
Shell. That's why you can do that. There's Ghost in the Shell. There's the green numbers falling like that. Okay, that's Ghost in the Shell. Or there's Neuromancer, or there's John Woo, the slow motion, all the bullet casings falling in slow motion and doves flying, and like, yeah, okay, there's John Woo. So you see all of that stuff. Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, he even does the little Bruce Lee thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you get all these things pulled together, but it's like cool.
Yeah. And I feel like if you'd seen that stuff, you kind of knew the language.
That's right.
In some ways.
Yeah.
But now I don't know how anybody would really do that, because there's so much to pull from.
Yeah.
That it's, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how the Matrix landed for different people, right? But at least that the main thread was clear of this world of possibilities versus where you're confined, not confined, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like when I experience shows now, like when I talk to people, it's always at the, cool characters, cool visuals, cool content level. Yes. And it's a little bit harder to get at that more spiritual, cultural level implications of it, because what's preloaded in each person is so different now.
Yeah.
And so, one show that I was blown away by recently, and I didn't even know about the books, is Silo.
Oh yeah.
That I was like, oh, okay. It feels old school in some way, and I can't pick out why, but it feels.
Yeah. Well, see, to me, that I think Silo is an example of what you're talking about. Like you could almost do the same thing with Silo, like we just did with the Matrix, where Silo to me feels, it's a bit like Logan's Run. In the sense of it
feels 70s.
It feels, it kind of does. Like it's a little grittier and dirtier, right? Logan's Run was super clean and all that, but that was kind of 70s sci-fi. But that idea of there's the overlords, whoever's in charge, these faceless people, you never see them, that sort of created by necessity a controlled society, in these like in Logan's Run they're in domes, but in the Silo they're in underground in silos. But otherwise it's the same idea, and you have to control the population. Like in Logan's Run, you just kill everybody that turns 21, but in Silo you don't kill everybody, but you're definitely controlling who can get pregnant and who can't, and you're lying about it. You're not upfront about that. But you have to. These are things you have to do, right, to kind of keep humanity alive and to keep society going. I'm sure you could find lots of other influences to Silo, but Silo does have that kind of old school feel to it, of like some nefarious group of people put this thing together, and maybe they did it so long ago that the people alive now don't even remember why they're doing this, but we just have to do it because the book says this, right? The manual says to do this.
That feels interesting when you talk about the religious.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's definitely part of
it. Graham Hancock, he's a figure, with his show on Netflix now. But I've read some of his books, and one of the things that he mentioned, kind of observing indigenous cultures, is he has this belief that myth of the past is encoding practical information.
Yes. So
sometimes you'll see like a weird story with very specific numerology, and it's like, well, why is it so specific for a story where you're just supposed to get a usual whatever lesson out of it? It's like, do you need that number to be so specific?
Right.
And so that got me thinking about a lot of religious beliefs and systems. In Africa, I don't remember so well because I was so young and we left early, but there's a lot of indigenous little stories and
Yeah.
principles and fables and stuff like that. And you hear them in there. The overall thing is silly sometimes sounding if you're a
Yeah.
Western person, but then it's giving you very specific information about this tree versus that tree, or this animal
Yeah.
versus that animal. Like, don't mess with this, but don't mess. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
in a story, but once you have the story, it's like it's programmed.
That's
you know?
right.
And when I look at religious beliefs without critiquing one or the other, scripture or so on and so forth, like we have a very modern system of like rigidly locking into it.
That's
instead
right.
of being able to isolate like what's the bigger,
Yeah.
Principle here, like what is the outcome of this text in terms of an impact on a person
That's
versus rigidly adhering to what you think it believes in your time.
That's right.
And to me, like all the rules and stuff in Silo, the show, makes me feel like,
Yeah.
you might have written the thing back then to control people, and then they followed it rigidly for 300 years and turned it into something you didn't.
That's right. You
mean
didn't
for it
intend
to be that way,
That's
but
yeah.
they revere it, and it's it's life
Yes.
or death, and it's just like
Yeah.
we
What do they
do
call
that?
it? Well, yeah. Do you remember what do they call it in Silo? It's what do they call that book? I forgot what they call it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, but that's basically what it is, right? It's like when they started in the beginning, it was like
The Pact.
The Pact. There you go. It's
Yeah.
But basically, it's a Bible. When you see it, it's a big black leather-bound book, right, with a little ribbon in it, and you have to read. And then there's different versions of the Pact. I love that's genius too, because it's also like, well, there's the King James, and then there's the NIV, and then there's the right. So there's the original version of the Pact, but then but that would have some mistakes. So we updated that, but it's still at the end of the day, it's like this Pact, this book that was just intended to be something to keep humanity alive, in a practical way, right? It's like, like Jesus saying, the Sabbath was made for man. Man wasn't made for the Sabbath, right? You get to the place in your religion where now the thing that was created, like as in the Sabbath was just like, hey man, you guys are working really hard. It'd be really great for you would just be to take a day off, have one day where you just don't do anything and you just relax and like, oh, that's a great idea, everybody. Let's just do that. And then it becomes there's all these laws and rules, and if you break the Sabbath, now we're going to kill you. We're like, what? I thought it was just a good idea for me to take a break. No, if you don't take a break, or if you don't take a break the right way, now we're going to stone you to death or whatever. It just becomes, so it reaches this level of
get really stressed out about your day off.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Now you're all stressed out about your day off instead of it being like, oh yeah, I get to really enjoy this. Yeah, and there's so many things in sci-fi too that have, keyed in on that. Like, did you ever watch Babylon 5?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you remember, but there was a great episode with Jakar, and he was like also like they're an alien race, but they had a very, they had like a messianic figure, and they had their scripture around this messianic figure, and there was a great episode where somehow Jakar went back in time, and he accidentally becomes that messianic figure. Because what he's doing is like, because he's so religious, right? And they've never heard of this guy. He starts quoting from the scriptures, but now they're writing it down because he said it. That's the first they've ever heard it, was because he said it.
Oh.
Yes. And by the end of it, they want to kill him because he's going against the scriptures. And he's like, I'm the one that told you this, right? But he kind of becomes his own, and then he thinks it's hilarious, right? Then he's just like, oh, this has become nonsensical now, right? Yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes of Babylon 5, where he just realizes like, oh, these things that were started off just being about wisdom and loving one another and caring for one another or whatever, get turned into these laws and rules down the line where now you're going to kill me because I'm breaking the scripture, but I'm the one that told you this stuff in the first place. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, Babylon 5 is a good show. Did you hear that supposedly the Babylon 5 pitch was rejected, but then taken and used to make Deep Space Nine?
Yeah, actually, well, no, I heard it kind of let's see. did I hear it the other way? I heard something about that. Yeah, because Deep Space Nine.
Because Babylon 5 was
Yeah.
written
Okay.
first,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
DS9 came out first because he
Ah.
like it. They wouldn't do it
Right.
because I think Straczynski just wanted too much control. I don't remember what the story was, but it was like it was rejected, and then like all of a sudden, oh, they're doing a space station in front of the wormhole, and
Yeah.
the commander,
And
the
all these different
emissary,
races, and yeah, he's the emissary. He's
yeah,
going to bring peace. Yeah, they're both very similar. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's been a long time, but I had heard that there
and it
was
was
something
just
about that.
it would have been really expensive to do but the CGI just got good enough by 95 that they were able to do
Right.
the show that
Although when you go and watch it now, it hasn't aged well.
yeah, I mean, at the time, I remember watching it and thinking, "This is."
I thought it was amazing at the time. I was like,
cool.
"Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever." I used to
But
love that.
it was close because the way they did DS9 was with practical models,
Yes.
and then as the show went on, they started bringing in the CGI when it was good enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I always thought Babylon 5 was the more, at least. I mean, I love DS9. It's probably I think it's the best show out of all of them.
Yeah.
Because its richness.
Yeah, I would say when it first started, DS9 first started, I wasn't a fan.
Yeah.
But those last like 2 or 3 seasons were so good, and I feel ripped off that they ended Deep Space Nine before they really got into, because like if you remember right, they were just getting into the stuff like the Maquis and what was that other race? There were the shapeshifters, right? That they had infiltrated
changelings.
The changelings, yeah, that they had infiltrated, and they were going to create a war between the Kardashians and the Klingons. They were actually brewing to stoke a war. So it was going to be another war, and then so the Federation had to decide if they were going to go on the side of the Klingons or the side of the changelings or the Kardashians. And then it's just sort of like, and it's over. Like, what? Dude, you were just building up to this massive, amazing thing, and then it was just like, oh, anyway, never mind.
I mean, they did the war. What I felt was, so I don't remember how all the seasons went because they had the Maquis thing going on.
Yeah, I love
but
that.
They did have the war, and they dragged. One of the most interesting episodes was Sisko did something pretty unethical, like he did a bunch of lying drag the Romulans into it because they needed help.
That's right.
So they did have the war. I don't think they took it to its ultimate conclusion before they wrapped it up with like Sisko dying and all that. But I don't know. I felt they did a pretty good take on the war. My guess is if you're following the ideal Roddenberry of like happy Star Trek world, they couldn't go to the full grit of what war was.
Yeah, you're right.
Because they went as like dirty as they could with the Star Trek level. They showed some of the not so humanitarian stuff and the unethical stuff and the underhanded, but they didn't really go to like how gritty it would have been. They never showed like a full on ground battle. They never showed.
No. You didn't see bodies. Yeah.
No. Yeah, bodies spilling out of starships, and they didn't show that. They definitely showed losses. They had some of the biggest space battles since like that Wolf 359 thing. They had a bunch of like,
Yes.
But it was always like the same stuff, right? The Galaxy class, and then they had a bunch of Excelsiors.
Yes.
And then the Defiant, and then like the same 3 Klingon ships,
Right.
So to me, I think that's what happened. They couldn't go because it would have been a different genre.
Yeah.
I think
it would have been fantastic. We got so close.
Those guys went on to do Battlestar Galactica.
I know Ronald Moore. Went on to do DSP, which was the best. That was one of the greatest sci-fi shows ever, except for the really kind of cheesy ending. I loved it straight through, just glued to the TV. Every episode on that series, loved it.
Yeah, that one. I think they're doing another one.
Oh, they're doing another reboot of Battlestar Galactica? That doesn't need to happen, dude. I've got all the DVDs.
I know.
I can just watch them
I
anytime I
know.
feel like it. Yeah, it doesn't need to be redone. And I don't believe that a remake is going to be better. I just don't
They're
think.
like they. I saw it on I think Katie Sackhoff's podcast. Who were talking about it, and they got the blessing from I think Ronald to do it.
Yeah.
But they don't know if it's going to be like the same story again or what happens going forward.
See, look, please don't do the same story again. I can't sit through the whole thing again. But yeah, if you did a side story, like, I think would be interesting would be like show another Battlestar that we didn't know about that survived, and like a different commander and different survivors and different experiences with the Cylons, and that could be interesting. Like, or like you said, like what happens. But I don't know that there's a story to tell afterwards. Like,
to me, it's this problem we have in today's entertainment where the brand is what they're selling. I don't know if they care. So they're going to want the Galactica. Yeah. They're going to want Apollo. They're going to want Starbucks. They're going to want Adama.
And you have to have the Cylons in there because they're so cool. Yeah.
I bet if they tie it to this one, they'll probably just go, okay, 3,000 years in our future.
Yes.
Here we go again,
Yeah. It has all happened before and it will happen again. Yeah. There's your tagline right there. we already wrote it. We can write the first pilot right now. Yeah. It's the same. Yeah. Same thing. That's funny. Yeah. Well, I'm personally, I'm really loving Severance. I don't know if you're watching that.
But I haven't.
Great.
I hear good things.
So good.
I have to make time for new stuff. Like that's one challenge that I have is if something's really good, like I have to put my pencil down, my work down, and like stare at it.
Yeah, I know.
And to carve out an hour, usually it's like I have to, have a friend that okay, we're gonna like stream it, or we're gonna sit down and watch something, or sometimes it's research where I'm working on something and the client says, hey, you need to watch this. I'm like, fine.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
But yeah, Severance, I think I should get on that for sure.
Yeah, I think to me it's one of the best shows on TV right now. So
yeah.
Well, cool, man.
Now,
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to mention we talked about Gibson. So he had three waves of books.
Yes.
There's the Neuromancer, the Sprawl trilogy.
Yes. That's Neuromancer,
that's the first three.
Overdrive, Count
Zero. Yeah. And then there's the middle one, which is Ultima's Parties. Yeah, the Bridge trilogy. And then Virtual Light and there's another one.
Iduru.
Yeah. So, and then the other Pattern Recognition and so it's interesting that his stuff kind of moves backwards in time. I don't know if you've noticed this.
Yeah, well, but it does. Yeah,
it's not backwards, but less far away from the present.
Yes. Well, to me, Pattern Recognition it's a science fiction, but it's helping you realize that we are living in a science fiction world now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So his book, All Tomorrow's Parties, I read in college. I just want to mention, I found it to be one of the funniest things I've ever read.
Okay. That's the one I haven't read. I haven't read that.
It's good. I just want to throw it out there because it made me laugh. And I feel like, sometimes, I don't think it was written as a comedy, but he is funny.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes some of this stuff is really, really weighty, but that book just brought the fun back to it. And I think that's something that maybe, we didn't touch on too much, but like some of this stuff can also be like lighthearted and fun. And,
right. Or just, like I love satire, right? I love stuff like that. So when you can, like some of my favorite sci-fi are satires. Like that's what I love about like RoboCop, the first one, and Starship Troopers. Paul Verhoeven, nailed it. Like just it's so great and over the top, and so I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, I should check it out. I think that's one of the few I haven't read that one. I've read Virtual Light. I've read Iduru. I didn't read All Tomorrow's Parties, so I got to read that one.
I think you'll like it.
Yeah,
It's something that I think every movement he perfected in the last book.
Yeah.
It's the most chill, easy, natural one, I think, of the three.
Okay. Very cool.
But anyway.
Yeah, I got to check it out. Well, I've got a huge list of books to read, so I'll add it to the pile.
Same here.
Yeah. Well, this has been really cool, JP. Thank you so much for coming on and geeking out with me a little bit, talking about sci-fi and comics and movies and everything else. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This was really, really cool. I mean, this is probably one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So anytime. Yeah. And beyond this, I think one day we got to do this. You got to work on something.
I would love to.
So
yeah, I would love to, man. We've talked about it. We just haven't come up with the right concept. Maybe I got to come up with the right idea that something that gets you excited and we can do something together. That'd be fun.
Let's do it.
Yeah, man. I have a publishing company, so we could do something. So
we'll
JP,
talk.
Tell people how to get a hold of you if they want to follow more of what you're doing. By the way, JP is a fantastic artist. You really need to at least go check out his website and look at his work. But yeah, let them know where to find you, where to keep up with you.
So Mavinga.com is the easiest kind of hub that links to everything. I need to update that site, but it's got all the links. I'm on Instagram. It's probably where I'm pretty much active fairly regularly.
Yeah.
I also have a Patreon, Patreon/Mavinga. So those are more like core fans that really want to support what I'm doing. I send people prints, little original sketches and things like that, for the people that have been there for a long time. They get my booklets and everything like that.
Yes.
And that's where I announce my projects and stuff first. So I am working on 2 book projects right now that'll be announced pretty shortly. So
very cool.
Yeah, jump on, follow, and that's why you're here about what's coming.
Sounds great. All right, everybody. JP, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for watching and listening. We'll be here next week. Matt and I will be back together again next week on the live show. Tuesday, the episode drops with JP, Derek Webb, and Angie Von Slaughter talking about art as creative resistance. And then we'll see you again on Friday on the bonus show with me and Matt on Friday, answering your calls on the hotline, 530-332-8020. We'll see you next time, I guess. Take care.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.